And that brings us to a special guest we have on here. Sam B, would you like to elaborate on this slide, please?
Okay. So I sponsor a couple of guys. My name's Sam B. I'm an addict. I sponsor a couple of guys through the Plain State Zonal Forum sponsorship Behind the Walls. You know, there's a lot of things that are similar when we're sponsoring is, you know, they're just another addict just like us. They work the steps. They have some of the same day-to-day issues. But on the other hand, we may go, like right now, especially with COVID, our letters have slowed down drastically. Some people are not.
Por el COVID.
Some people are not allowed to send mail right now. Some of our prisons are completely closed down.
Porque están cerrados.
We just remind our people that we don't want to do like we do sometimes on the outside and say,
hacemos lo que hacemos afuera algunas.
Hey, you know, you haven't replied in 2 weeks, I'm going to drop you. Sometimes those things can be out of their hands. They can, you know, they can be in the hole, they can be, and they have lost their privileges, whether it's their fault or not. So we try to remind our sponsors that, you know, that is a regard that you need to consider. I have one that I hear from very, very regularly, and I have another who is very spaced out. That doesn't mean he doesn't want to work the steps. It just means that, you know, there could be something going on in that particular prison. The two guys that I happen to sponsor are not in the same prison, nor are they in the same state that I'm in. I'm in Texas, so I don't sponsor anybody from Texas. And so it really works out well. It's, you know, and I've not found that they have any issues sharing. Of course, when I write my first letter, you know, I remind them that anything that may incriminate them, you know, that our letters are going to be open. So it's a little bit different than on the outside. We're not going to get a complete and full fork step necessarily, because you don't want them to put themselves in a situation where they're going to give the details to something that they don't need to give the details to. So they'll give the fourth step the best that they can. And so that is a little bit different. You know, and with us writing back and forth, sometimes the conversation takes a little longer. Like if my sponsee writes and then I'll ask him, you know, before we move on, can you elaborate on these things that you've written about? Or how can we change this? Or what is the positive aspect of something? Then it's going to take a process for me to get that back. So when we get our letters, our postal coordinator scans them into my email, and then I have 2 weeks to write them back. The one thing that I like about sponsorship Behind the Walls is I have an out of the ordinary job. I'm a truck driver, and so sometimes it's hard for me to sponsor people in town, and it's actually easier for me to sponsor people behind the walls because I can mail my letter from anywhere in the United States and still get it done. You know, we're not ever going to be meeting in person. We also set up and know that from the very beginning that I'm never going to meet my sponsee in person. At the release of their term in prison, whether they're being released or not being released, if they're being released, then we send them the information for wherever local area that they are going to be going to. And then sponsorship Behind the Walls ceases communication with that sponsee. And that's all I've got.